Hello and welcome to ITG's Listen and Learn. My name is Dr. Aaron Witek, Professor of Trumpet at Ithaca College and Yamaha Performing Artist. My presentation for you is going to be on developing musicianship through active listening. If you are a teacher, performer, or both, our most valuable tool is our ears. Our ears make it possible for us to listen to things such as tone, intonation, style, musicality, expression, rhythm, time, balance, and blend. There are two types of listening, active and passive listening. Active listening is where we are mentally engaged, where we make musical decisions that are involved while performing or while listening to others perform, and we are directing the ensemble. Such things that we might be listening to is intonation, style, blend, and balance. Passive listening is more like background noise, often complementary to another task, so it could be a movie soundtrack or listening to the radio while cleaning the house. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on active listening since that's what we primarily do as musicians. As a performer and/or teacher, active listening is crucial in making decisions, evaluating both other musicians and oneself. This can be used for giving feedback as an educator. So you could think about like in an ensemble setting, Johnny, that third in the chord, can you bring it down some? It's a little high. Or bass drum, you're a little bit behind the low brass. In a lesson setting, Susie, you're closing off your throat while you're going from a G to C. Try to follow through with your air and keep your throat open. Or your multiple tonguing doesn't sound like it's matching up to your fingers. Can also be used in adjusting pitch, articulation, volume, and time while performing. We're always adjusting pitch while performing. If you think about it, think about when we play a chorale and we're having to listen to others and adjust. Sometimes, or I would say most of the time after you've done a lot of training, this starts to become second nature, I'd say. And then another thing that we have to do, right, is listen to the principal player or the lead trumpet or whoever you're playing a line with and matching style, articulation, and anything in that regard. And then there's training purposes as an educator and performer. So this is where you might be working on intonation exercises, dictation exercises, studying professional recordings, or studying recordings of yourself. If you think about it, telling a student to go home and listen to a particular piece of music or to listen to another instrument is way too broad of an instruction. We have to tell a student what to listen for. We need to guide them through this process so they learn how to actively listen. Later in this presentation, I will go over more of the elements that make up active listening as a musician. There are a million reasons why to use active listening. One of the biggest, I feel, is learning how to play the correct style. The music on your screen can be played a whole bunch of different ways depending on the style that we're going to play it in. An example of playing it in the classical style sounds like this. Notice that the grace note was played on the beat and that there was some more dynamic shaping than just forte and piano. Next, I will demonstrate this in the Baroque style. Notice here that the dynamics are terrace with forte and then subito piano. Also, you'll notice that the grace note was played before the beat. Another style I'd like to play this in is swing. Obviously here you can hear that the notes are swung and that there's a little more inflection and dynamic shaping than we heard in the Baroque style. You'll notice that the notation doesn't have any instruction on how to play in these different styles. One would have had to listen to these styles to be able to reproduce it. As musicians and music teachers, it's our job to do everything that's on the page, but also to interpret and add musicality. This is through active listening that we have this experience to recall on. There was a high school trumpet ensemble that I was once invited to come coach that was playing an arrangement of a piece by Mozart. They played all the correct rhythms, pitches, dynamics, but it sounded more like a Sousa march. I realize these students must not have had a palette of musical ideas to choose from. They probably didn't have enough listening experiences of what Mozart sounds like. Listening to a wide range of musicians and styles gives us a palette of musical ideas that we become familiar with. Much like how a painter selects from a palette of colors to create their work of art, a musician must have a wide range of different performers, composers, and styles on their palette board that they can then pick from and make their masterpiece. The next few slides I'll be taking you through involve the components that one should pay attention to while active listening. The concepts I will be covering include tone, vibrato, phrasing and dynamics, style and articulation, rhythm, and intonation. In order for you to produce the tone or sound that you want, you must hear it in your head. Repetitive listening to a professional musician that you really like will help ingrain that person's sound in your head. This is similar to reading an email that might be from a close friend or family member and hearing it in the sound of their voice. Now, when you're listening to someone's sound, you should pay attention to the nuances that makes their sound special. Listen to the boldness. Is it airy/breathy? Is it full of overtones? When they change pitches, how does it sound? I actively have my students listen to how a professional leaves a note. Are they foreshadowing that note? Are they inflecting on that note? What are they doing? Part of what makes someone's sound recognizable might be vibrato/spin. Now, vibrato is used to add warmth and energy to the sound. Listen to different variations of vibrato. There's vibrato that has a wide change in pitch or smaller. Is the vibrato fast or slow? Listen to when and how it's used. Vibrato is not always used. Listen to how a musician possibly changes the speed of their vibrato through a phrase. So as a music line crescendos, does the musician speed up the vibrato? Does it get wider? These are things you should be asking yourself as you listen to the music. If we just played exactly what's on the page of music, it would be boring and lack musicality. There's a reason we particularly enjoy listening to professional musicians, and it's because they bring energy and they bring musicality while they perform. So active listening and working on phrasing and dynamics are extremely important here. This is because we can get ideas from other musicians and put it together and make our own musical product. This is going back to the palette idea that I talked about earlier, having all these different musical ideas and sounds and putting it together and making our own creative art piece. So with my students, when they're working on phrasing and dynamics, I have them actively listen and have a piece of that music in front of them. And on that music, I want them to write out all the dynamics they hear, all the micro shaping, the breath points, how rubato is used with arrows. They're really analyzing, almost transcribing. Well, they're transcribing the phrasing and dynamics of what they hear. Now, another thing I ask them to do is to make notes how different phrases make them feel or what they sound like. Is it bold? Is it heroic? Is it soft? Is it light? Moving on from phrasing and dynamics, we're going to talk about style. Just like marking the phrasing and dynamics, take time to mark in and make comments about the style and what you hear. So, is the note long? I put a line above a note if it sounds really long. Do they add taper on certain notes? I put little decrescendos then. Does it have a lift? Does it have an accent? Is there more weight on certain notes? How are notes released? Listen to the taper of a note. Is there no taper? Is it tongue stopped? Is there a crescendo to the end of the note? Or is it an open release? These are all things that you can mark in the music to kind of remind yourself of different ways that you can play it, different ways that you can hear the style of how a musician sounds. Moving on is rhythm. Having good rhythm is extremely important for both the performer and the listener. Bad rhythm can make both feel uncomfortable, resulting in a lack of confidence, and can negatively impact all aspects of the performance. Taking time to listen to good recordings can help develop better rhythm. Some things that I have my students do while active listening to rhythm is to count rhythms along with the recording, subdivide dotted A/16th rhythms, and triplet rhythms. This is to really learn the difference between those two rhythms that tend to have a little bit of, I guess you could say, variance in how people play them. Listen for the rate of a accelerando or a ritardando. Listen to if in Baroque music, if something is double dotted A/16ths. Listen to the rate that rhythms are swung. So is it heavy swing? Listen for even/uneven notes like you might have in Baroque music. Next is intonation. Listening to professional ensembles, both live and recorded, will help one develop their ears to what good intonation sounds like. I'll have my students also sing and play along with recordings that have good intonation. I'll also have them obviously practice playing chorales and duets with active listening to each other. And then I also have them do work with drones, such as using tonal energy and active listening with that and trying to match up. Even though I went through all the components of active listening as separate things, they are all deeply intertwined with each other. So think about tone. Vibrato and intonation definitely affect tone. Phrasal dynamic is also part of tone, right? We can hear how someone spins a line or adds more vibrato as they crescendo. It's part of the phrasing and the dynamics. Style and articulation also can be influenced by both phrasing and dynamics, but by rhythm, right? Do we have double dotted 16th notes in Baroque music? Is something swung? That's obviously affecting the style and the rhythm. In closing, I hope that you see just telling somebody to go listen is not the answer on how to teach them how to listen. We should really think about guiding them and producing a flow chart for them on how to listen to something. Thank you so much for sitting through this presentation.